Am I the last one?
You are.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so I was also at Findlay. I was in Glenwood Middle School, shared a wall with Leslie's classroom, so we're right across the hall. I also teach 8th grade, but I have 3 pre-algebra classes. So we have block periods that are like 84 minutes long, or in our extended days, a little bit longer. But for the duration of my experiment, or not experiment, but the actual research, we had our regular 84-minute blocks. And so I took all 3 of my classes, and I was evaluating how I could seat the students within our classroom and have the seating by grouping students through their seating. So I'm determining if that would have any effect on their overall performance in the class, whether it would be behavioral or academically, or performance on my assessments. So I took, I originally wanted to do this with 3 of my classes. However, I found out because my one class at the end of the day was really, really rowdy, I wasn't able to seat them specifically because of some behavioral issues that I had to separate a few students from each other. So it was another concern I didn't think about coming in there, is the fact that specifically seating students according to these different ways would not be possible because of behavioral issues. By separating certain students, you get way more effective. So I wasn't able to use my last class, so I used 2 blocks. In one of the blocks, I seated the students randomly. So I had them just randomize it, and they were placed wherever they were placed. So they were working with, some high students were placed together, low students were placed together. Academically, I guess, on their performance on past assessments is what I was using to rate them. So the second class is when I took their scores on the last assessment, so the last major unit assessment, and I looked at where they fell in the class. And I basically split the class into quartiles. So the people who took the top 25%, middle 25%, and then the bottom 25%. And I was trying to seat students based on their grade. So I took them, gave them numbers in a rank, and then I used those numbers, and I placed students who were in between the 25 and 50th percentile with the top percentile, and the bottom 25% was with the upper middle quartile of the students' performances. So that's determined where they were seating in the classroom. So the lowest students were seated up front, and they were alternating with students who were doing a little bit better than them. And so that was based on where they're sitting. We also use seating partners a lot in my classroom. So this is what my mentor teacher actually had established, where they work a lot in groups together on assignments or homework or whatever. And so I kind of continued that throughout my project, and also when they were sitting in groups of 4. By seating them together in different blocks, that they easily were able to, when we say we had groups of 2 was our base, or we'd use groups of 4. So when they're seating in groups of 4, you'd have 2 lower achieving students, I guess, and 2 higher achieving students. And so I was evaluating if this seating algorithm kind of thing would work or have any kind of effects, significant effects on how the students did in my class. So what I found was, I tried to generalize the results in terms of academic performance. However, that's really not really reliable, because there's so many different factors that go into that. Whether it's just the unit they're covering, because I went from geometry, I was actually just started geometry topic once again. So it was a different than how I started with, we had more of a algebraic unit beforehand, then we moved into a geometry unit. So what I used to originally base their seating positions on was different. Some students are better at geometry than algebra, and so their scores would have, of course, changed because of that. But what I found overall, when I did this 3 times, I used my methodology to place the students in seats, and it happened to be about 2 to 3 weeks of sitting in their groups before I had to change to the next assessment, or the way the unit fell. So this all fell in the same geometry unit. And so in the end, when we took a look at both the classes, the scores kind of vary between students, but what I really found was the most difference between the 2 classes was the mobility of the lower students. In each of my classes, the highest achieving students, or the people who, we had classes about 20, so about the top 5 students, in each of the classes, they stayed about the same. So the same 5 students scored about the highest on every single assessment that I gave. There was a few people that moved around, however, it's pretty consistent for both my classes. But in the class that I specifically seated them based on their performance, I had the people who were in the lowest quartile, there was a lot of mobility in that group. So if someone was in the bottom 25%, they typically were there only once or twice, compared to all 3 times. I think there was no one in that second group that was in the bottom for all 3 of my assessments. So I thought that was interesting, that the grades actually, the lower students were moving up a little bit more than in the group where I had random seating. But like I said, there was lots of factors that I didn't take in when I was planning this out, and I had 3 classes to do it on, so I think it'd be really interesting to try different methodologies. I was going to try to do seating a different way as well for the 3rd class, but like I said, that just didn't work out after I did the first seating arrangement with them, and I just had to keep them separate for behavioral issues. So I did video recording as well, and then I used their assessments as well as a survey. And that survey, I think, gave me the most information. I was really trying to go for more quantitative data instead of qualitative, and I really found that the student feedback on what they gave me in the survey, I gave them a scale of 1 through 5 to say how well they thought they worked with the student they were sitting next to, and then how well they thought that they worked with their group member, and like how well they thought they were good at math, kind of thing. So there's like a few questions on how they perceived their ability in math, as well as how they perceived their how they worked with their partner as well. So I found that in looking at specific cases in the classes, I could see where there was really effective pairings and effective groupings were created. However, throughout both the classes, it was kind of random, and it was about the same amount of effective groups that were created through the way I was seeing them. So I think that paying specific attention to how you're seeing the students is really significant. However, there's not just one blanket algorithm that you can establish that will be the most efficient at seeing students. It's taking care, looking at individual students, how they perform, the way they work, and pairing them with students that you think that would be good. So I'd like to investigate it more, gather more data, but and also increase the size of the length of the unit, because I change seats every like 2 to 3 weeks, and I don't think that gave them enough time working with that group to build more confidence and get more, I think, reliable results that I can really draw some more conclusions on. So, any questions? Yes.
So I know you said you couldn't do the 3rd class because of behavior. Did you try it? Or
I tried it for the first one.
I was gonna say, did you? I mean, even if you didn't do it to the full extent, did you do it in any way after that?
No. After that, I had to specifically. I tried to keep in that class is where I looked at the different students, and this is where I thought that I actually looked at their data as well, and I found that once again their scores. When I mostly looked at the distribution of their grades and where the students fell in comparison to their classmates and how they scored. So it's not necessarily, oh, the whole class scored higher or lower. No, it's like, where did the mid-range students, did they stay in the middle of the class, or did they move up, or in general, because each assessment is like slightly different. And in that class, once again, it was pretty much the same as the other 2. But in that way, I specifically seated the students like, okay, this kid cannot sit by this kid, so we're going to separate them on opposite corners of the room. I think they'll work well with this person. And so I knew the students well enough at that point that I think that was, once again, created just as many effective pairings as I did with both the other seating methodologies that I used.
Okay, so it wasn't completely structured, but it was kind of.
Yes, it was more. It wasn't according to what I originally intended. I had to alter that. Just.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think you mentioned it, but I could have just missed it. Did you ever mention to the students how you were arranging them?
No, they didn't have any clue. I just said, okay, we're changing seats after every unit, so they didn't know it was.
Okay. Did they catch on at all, or?
I think with the surveys, because I gave them the surveys after every time, they're like, well, you're seating us some way, but they had no, like one class was completely random. And they thought, thought I was picking on them if I was moving them away from people that they liked being by and chatting by. So I think they thought I was just, I don't know what they thought about it, but I think they were I was trying to play games or separate specific students. I think I was targeting them or something. So maybe if I gave them a survey at the beginning and the end, they wouldn't have caught on, but I gave it to them like 3 times over the course. But